there. This is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. Creative people, I love it. I love what they do. I love how they hang in there. I think it makes the world go around, art and creativity. So I love talking to people about those things. Today, my guest is my old friend, Alonso Duralde. He has been on this podcast before, but he's got a new book out. It's a beautiful book. It's called Hollywood Pride, a celebration of LGBTQ plus representation and perseverance in film. I like that, perseverance. It's a beautiful book. It's from Turner Classic Movies. And I've been sort of following the odyssey of him writing the book because I listened to his podcast, Linoleum Knife, and it was ambitious. And I know he didn't have years and years to do it, and it came together beautifully. And it was fun to talk to him about it to round out our Pride Month. Before we get to the interview, though, I want to remind you that this podcast, Dennis Anyone, is brought to you by me. I do it because I love it, but if you like it too, there are a few ways you can support it and help me cover my expenses, things like that. There's a virtual tip jar button on my website, which is dennisanyone.net. You click on that and you can leave a tip in my virtual tip jar, or you can also do this new thing called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can just buy me a coffee, you know, like $5 or $10 or whatever. And it's a way of saying, hey, I enjoyed that interview. Coffee's on me. I love it. A few folks have already started doing that, so thank you so much. I actually get very delighted when I see that somebody bought me a coffee. It's cool. And I work a lot in coffee houses, so it like feels like, oh, this is a workplace thing. Anyway, I don't know how I'm connecting those dots, but it's delightful. And or you can do it at buymeacoffee.com/Dennis Hensley. Or Dennis Anyone. I'm not sure. One of the two. Anyway, we'll figure it out. It's a coffee thing. The other thing you could do is become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of a group of shows, a family, if you will, of LGBTQ shows on the Derek and Romaine Podcast Network. And for a monthly fee, you get my show early, and you get all these other great shows. So learn about that at dnrstudios.com. The other thing I want to plug is the Mismatch Game. It's our Pride Edition, Taste the Rainbow, and it is coming up Saturday, June 29th at 8 p.m. at the Renberg. So if you're in LA, come and see us. It's going to be fun. All right, enough of the plugs. Here now is the interview with Alonso Duralde, the author of Hollywood Pride. Joining me now from Los Angeles, it's Alonso Duralde. He is the author of Hollywood Pride, a celebration of LGBTQ plus representation and perseverance in film. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dennis.
This book is beautiful. Your book is beautiful.
Given that I had nothing to do with how that came out, I can agree with you that yes, it is utterly gorgeous. They did a beautiful job laying it out, picking the artwork, the fact that it gives a little rainbow at you when you look at the pages from the side, like all those kind of things.
Yes, the rainbow cover. So we got Tab Hunter, we got Divine Dietrich, right, in the middle?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Who's the fourth one?
That is Anna Mae
Wong. I knew that. Okay. I didn't want to say it and be wrong.
I hear you.
And then Laverne Cox on the cover. Beautiful. How did this book come about? Because I remember you kind of getting the deal for it and feeling like, oh boy, this has to happen fast.
Yeah, it was kind of on a deadline for sure. So they came to me, Running Press, who does the Turner Classic Movies books. Pitched me the thing. It was just something that they wanted to do already, and I think it's kind of a piece with a couple of books they had already done. They did Donald Bogle's Hollywood Black, which was a history of black artists and films in the Hollywood studio system, and then Luis Reyes's Viva Hollywood, which was like the Hispanic Latin version of that same history. And so this is the LGBTQ plus one. And I had worked with them some on some other stuff. They Running Press had published the Hallmark book that I did with the Deck the Hallmark guys, and so I had a relationship there. I had done a puzzle for TCM.
What? I want a puzzle. Do you still have a copy? I did a ton of puzzles during the pandemic. I love puzzles.
Oh.
What's the puzzle of?
The timing was perfect. So it's 50 male movie stars on one side and 50 female movie stars on the other side. So I helped them pick out who the 100 were going to be. And then there's a little booklet that comes with the puzzles where I wrote all the little mini biographies of everybody and suggested movies to watch. So that was my first foothold.
I don't just want that puzzle. I want it inside me. Where, I didn't know about the puzzle. I feel like I feel like I've been remiss, but anyway, is it for sale?
Yeah.
Can people buy it?
It is. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like if you put my name in most like sort of book sales search engines, the puzzle comes up. So yeah, you can absolutely still get it.
Although it's a two-sider. Those things are.
It is a two-sider.
Those things, I don't know.
But one side's kind of curvy and the other side's flat, so you can
figure it out.
You can figure it out.
All right. You have worked in film you've worked in film festivals as a critic. It's been your life. But when you set about doing this, were there things you didn't know, that the movies you hadn't ever heard of? Like, what did you learn in the process that you didn't already know?
Oh, I learned a bunch doing this book. I mean, I think when I pitched them the idea and gave them my presentation, I was like, oh, okay, I have the outline here. I know what I'm doing. But then you start really digging into it. And yeah, I uncovered a lot of things that were new to me that I'm sure other people were like, yeah, dummy, where have you been? So just individual people like, Angela Morley, who was the first openly trans person to be nominated for an Oscar. She was nominated for 2 actually in the 70s.
What was the department?
She was nominated in the song score category, which was a category they used to do more often when there were a lot of musicals. And she's a musician and conductor and arranger. You'll love this. As a TV composer, she did a lot of the scores for Dynasty and Wonder Woman.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. But also like arranged and conducted like all of the big John Williams stuff, like Superman and Star Wars. Like she's this huge, huge player that I just never heard of. I'd never heard of James Crabe, who was the cinematographer on movies like Rocky and The Karate Kid, but had gotten started in this group in LA called the Gay Girls Writing Club. And it was this very loose affiliation of like gay men in the film industry and drag queens. And they made campy shorts and even a feature film. And, this is like in the 60s. And so by the 70s, he's doing these very big mainstream movies. And that's a career trajectory that a cinematographer like in the 40s or 50s would never have had.
Right.
Like they had to keep it all on lockdown and then go do their stuff at the studio and whatever on the weekend. But like here's this guy who was like clearly not giving a single F, doing his thing and being out there and being very visible. And then like, going to work, shooting Stallone.
Amazing.
So like that's a really kind of cool historical progress. And I certainly didn't know, and apparently I'm one of the last to find this out, but millennial bisexuals really loved 1999's The Mummy.
Yeah, it's a thing, right? And I'm not sure why. Is it because they're both of the beautiful movie stars, Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz?
I mean, I think so. That's got to be part of it. I mean, there's this sort of just bounty of like pulchritude on display. Not just the 2 leads, but I mean, you've got Arnold Vosloo, who is no slouch. And then you've got it's in a smaller role, Patricia Velasquez, as like the mummy queen or whatever it is. So like, yeah, I can see people going in and being like, undecided, all of the above. Yes, please. This.
Yeah, I get it.
But news to me, but I started asking around and that was the one that came up over and over again. So yeah, just around every corner, new little things to discover.
I love it. I interviewed Patricia Velasquez for that movie, and the headline for the Movie Line article was "Vava Velasquez," which I maybe should have been canceled for. Maybe I should still be canceled for that. I didn't pick the headline though.
Look, everybody, if you were around in the 80s or 90s, then you just should be canceled anyway, because you did or said or wrote something that is not aging gracefully.
Yeah. The other night, I went to a show. It was a concert called Pride Anthems. A new friend of mine named Marty Thomas was in it, and he was a singer, and there were 2 other singers. And it was all these gay anthems together. And I just like shows and musicals and whatever. But as I was sitting there, there was this power of all of this collective work that kind of the collectiveness of it moved me. Like I found this power to it. When you were getting it all together and it was all coming together, did you have a sense of the whole or something about it, the journey of it all that you found moving?
I think there's just this profound sense of like we were there from the get-go, like
right.
From the jump. There were like these really popular actors and directors who were queer, and I think Justin Simeon put it really well. He wrote a really lovely blurb for the book, and he talked about how for for women and queer people and artists of color, there's always been this sense of having to kind of like find ourselves within the history of Hollywood. But then if you really start looking at the history of Hollywood, this is our thing. Like, we're baked into it from the get-go, and it's not a thing of like trying to sort of picture ourselves at the margins. Like, take us away and none of this happens.
Wow.
And that's what I think is kind of exciting about it. Like, there is no cinema as we know it without the contributions of these artists who shaped so much of what we see. And it's like I've been saying over and over again, like, yes, the great queer movies have, for the most part, a lot of queer people behind them, but a great many of the movies that your dad likes also have a great many queer people behind them.
Right. We were always in the mix. I love that line. Are there movies that, when people talk about Will and Grace on television, even though it's beloved by gay people, it's the one that straight people that made it okay. Like, even Joe Biden brought it up. Are there movies that did that really furthered acceptance, I guess, in the wider culture?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I think Philadelphia is a movie that at the time, for me, and I think for a lot of people who were sort of actively following the new queer cinema movement of the early 90s and who were seeing, like Greg Araki movies and stuff, that movie felt so tame and so kind of safe. But looking at it now, it's like, no, that's the movie that the moment needed. That's
right.
The movie that, like, Joe average moviegoer needed to sort of be like, oh, so people with AIDS aren't all like gross, monstrous, burdens on society. Oh, gay men aren't all, just this vaguely faceless them over there, and then I think a movie like Brokeback Mountain, which is quite bold in a lot of ways, and I think queer people immediately loved it and still do, was also a movie that caught straight people in the right way, that for ones who were willing to go with it, I think, understood maybe for the first time even that like, stomping on queer people's rights and their ability to live their lives the way they wanted to wasn't something that didn't have consequences. And so if this movie can make you care about these men and make you really like ache for these men who the only thing that's keeping them apart is the world.
Right.
And then that movie makes you ask, well, how am I part of the world? What am I doing to make the world crush the dreams of guys like this? I think that film was really effective for a lot of audiences.
Did you happen to be at the Oscar party that I threw with Dennis and Terrence the year Brokeback Mountain was nominated? I think we practically had a bale of hay. I don't think we had a bale of hay, but we were all dressed up like cowboys. It was going to be our night. And then it didn't win. I say we didn't win as though I made it. That was a memory.
No, that was a we though. I think we all felt very involved in that, and it seemed like there was going to be this big moment, and it won screenplay, it won director, and then that crash moment, I think, was the, if not the beginning of the end, maybe the middle of the end of my like taking the Oscars remotely seriously. Right. I'm still mad about it. It's 20 years, but I'm still mad about it.
I still am. I also remember at the time Nikki Fink, the journalist, writing a story for something saying Academy members aren't watching Brokeback. It's not going to win. Like, she saw it coming.
And some of them by name were saying it. Like,
it's on the bottom of the pile. Yeah.
Yeah, like what would John Wayne think was somebody's quote? I'm like, oh, give me but who would have guessed between now and then that a movie like Moonlight, which is like black and queer and low budget and, Claire Denis influenced, would win Best Picture? Like, that completely upends the notion of the kind of stuff the Academy votes for. And obviously a lot of that has to do with what they've been doing with kind of, giving these transfusions of life into the Academy membership, where it's not just the Ernest Borgnines of the world voting, but actually younger people and women and, people still involved in the industry and who are more open-minded about things. So, there is progress.
There is progress. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about are memorable experiences in the cinema, because we saw RRR together. And I had heard it was going to be amazing, and I reached out to you, and I'm like, this screening sold out, and you hooked it up with the publicist, and I got in, and it was at the Chinese, and it was just pandemonium. People were losing their minds. I was screaming, dancing. It was just amazing. So are there moments that you remember that aren't really about the movie so much as the experience in the cinema? Are there things that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, but they're very small. You know, it's nothing. It's nothing like the people doing the Natu dance in front of the IMAX screen of the Egyptian. But like I remember going with when I was still in the closet and in college, going with my best friend to see Prick Up Your Ears, and which is, you know, this biopic about the gay playwright Joe Orton, played by Gary Oldman, and you know his lover Kenneth Halliwell, played by Alfred Molina. And Orton loved what the British call so quaintly cottaging, which is basically like sex in public men's rooms. And there's a scene where they like
such a cute name for that act,
isn't
so
it?
cute.
I know, it's like someone should be pouring tea. Oh, we're cottaging, you know.
Yeah.
I'm tending to the begonias. But you know, so they like follow this guy into a bathroom and Orton says something like, oh, he's built like a brick shithouse. And I just remember like thinking to myself, don't respond. I tried to lock my face into the most sort of neutral thing, even though my brain was exploding because I hadn't really seen a film that was this sort of frank about like, you know, queer sexuality. But like sitting right next to me is my best friend that I'm not out to. And I was just like, you know, trying to like keep a lid on that. But then like a couple years later, after I had come out and was in my first relationship, I remember watching Parting Glances for the first time. And there's a scene very early on where like it's the main couple of the movie, you know, they've been in Central Park and one of them's sitting on a bench reading a book and the other one's, you know, jogging laps and stuff. And they go back to their apartment and they start kissing and they kind of fall into the bedroom and they collapse on the bed and the camera pans down from them sort of like making out and you get to their feet and one of them is using his feet to remove the other one's shoes. Mm. And I had done that. And it was like this moment of like, oh man, you know, cause I'd been watching like, you know, romantic and sexy movies my entire life, but had never participated in any of it. You know, I never had a dog in that hunt. And suddenly I recognized this moment from my life in a film. And it was just like, oh, I guess I've crossed the line now where I'm in the world, you know?
I remember that movie because the guy in it, was it John Bolger? Was that his name? The guy that jogged? He was in Guiding Light, which was the soap that I watched the most. Also, he had on little shorts, which were of the era. Yes. And it was very memorable. And then he is kicking off shoes just like you do. I remember when Death Trap came out and there's a spoiler alert, there's a kiss that happens that nobody's expecting. And I remember people in the audience like grossing out. Do you remember any audible gay gross out moments from unsuspecting straights?
Yeah, Dave and I went to see Spike Lee's Get on the Bus, which was really the first time he had put sort of multi-dimensional queer characters into one of his movies. And you know, it's all these it's a microcosm of black men who are all, you know, taking the bus to the Million Man March, two of whom happen to be gay men. And there's a scene where they kiss, and there were people in our theater that were not down for that and not ready for that. And so, yeah, that's probably the closest I've come, apart from the time we went to see the Color Purple musical, and the lady behind us was not thrilled about Suge and Celie kissing. And I'm just thinking, it's The Color Purple. Did you not know we were going to get to this part?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
I luckily have not dealt with a lot of the loud cringing. If anything, I have a lot of memories of like all my years at, you know, Outfest, seeing stuff, even just before I worked there, like going to see movies like Zero Patience or, you know, like this really wonderfully terrible movie from the early 70s called Some of My Best Friends Are, that just became very audience participatory, you know.
I don't know if this was part of Outfest, but remember they showed that 3D porn movie from
yes,
the 70s?
That was Outfest.
It was Outfest? It was
Heavy
Equipment, and it was at the Lemley Sunset, which is now a million other things, I don't know. But I just remember there was a cum shot and somebody shouted, "That didn't even hit the front row." Like I think they expected to be awash themselves.
Well, it's good. If you promised 3D, you need to deliver. My memory of that screening is it was one of those movies where they would use like public domain library music to score the sex scenes. So at one point they were playing the Yellow Rose of Texas. And like the entire audience, like gay men's chorus style, starts singing it in 4-part harmony.
Amazing. It was instrumental, right? It wouldn't have had vocals. Right.
It was like whistles or something, but everybody just sang. It was crazy.
There is something rousing about that song, though, that maybe it suited the encounter.
Really, underscored the moment, you know.
I was at a FYC screening the other night for Fellow Travelers, the Showtime show with Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey. And they showed the finale, and we're in a big theater at the new place in Beverly Hills. The name's escaping me. The fancy
the Fine Arts. Or?
It's not a theater. It's
Anyway,
I'm going to skip that part. So we're in a big theater in Beverly Hills, and there's a really explicit sex scene in the finale where Jonathan Bailey fucks Matt Bomer, and it's unfolding, and I'm like, oh, I'm used to watching this show at home. And I did have that feeling of like, I hope we're not upsetting any more delicate. I hope we're not upsetting any straight people. Like, I felt a little worried for people. Is everyone going to be okay?
Or the cops going to come in?
Or are we upsetting Beverly Hills matrons who just wanted the canapes and now they're watching butt fucking? And then I kind of thought, no, Dennis, this is our show. Yeah, they can suck it up.
Exactly, literally. Yeah, no, they bought their ticket for our culture. This is what you get.
But inside, I had that moment of like, oh, not for them.
There is something about, especially a show like that you're used to watching in a more intimate setting, there is that, and I think, I'm sure for the youngers won't even know what we're talking about, but yes, I think for us of a certain age, there's that flicker of like, oh, did everybody sign up for this? Are we good? Is it okay? But too bad. They'd let them learn something.
Yeah. Looking through your book, I started thinking about queer movies that I remember when I saw them, what was going on, what it was about. I remember going to Longtime Companion with a friend of mine. We were both in the closet. I was attracted to him. I think he might have been attracted to me, but nothing ever happened. But
right.
Yeah, we're just two straight bros going to see Longtime Companion.
As you do,
As you do. Like, we went to see that together, but heaven forbid we talk about any of our own feelings. But let's go see Longtime Companion.
Yeah, that Mary Louise Parker's so hot.
Are there other movies that you remember seeing the queer thing? I'll mention another one of mine. And The Object of My Affection with Paul Rudd and Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
Not a classic of the canon, but I saw it at a time in the 90s when it came out, and I was trying to make sense of my own life, I guess. And there was something about Paul Rudd. I guess it was a big studio production.
Yeah,
and I remember thinking, I was watching Paul Rudd, in a scene, and I was like, we get close-ups. Like, I never thought gay characters could get close-ups, or we could be the center of the story. And I remember leaving the theater and crying all the way to the car. I was so moved by, I don't know, the story or just getting close-ups. And of course, now I look back and I'm like, that wasn't even a gay guy. That was Paul Rudd. But we'll take it. We'll take what we can get, right?
Well, it's part of the fantasy that the movies deliver us, I remember trying to watch Making Love on cable. My mother was in the room and I was hoping she just wasn't paying attention, but of course didn't miss anything. And once the dude started making out, she was like, all right, change the channel, So I didn't see that movie for like another decade until I finally owned my own VCR. Yeah, I mean, I remember distinctly going to see Longtime Companion on opening weekend in Dallas, and I had just come out, and it was in this old school theater that used to be a one screener, and they'd cut it into a two screener, but still had this gigantic lobby, and there was a line of people curved all the way around the lobby, waiting for the next show. You'd think it was The Empire Strikes Back or something. Because it was in one theater, and there's a lot of gay people in Dallas, and we were all dying to see that movie. I feel fortunate in that I got to coincide with this cool moment of the early 90s. I worked at a film festival in Dallas where we screened Poison,
wow.
after it had won the award at Sundance, and there were some local right-wing rag, talked about, they tried to go after all of our sponsors about it. You're subsidizing this filth, but we sold out 2 shows and that movie opened at the Art House in Dallas and sold out shows because it was like there weren't that many options of things to see, and B, it had gotten so much free publicity from the Jesse Helmses of the world that even the people who would not have wanted to go see this like experimental queer triptych, blah, 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 whatever, they wanted to see this movie that they were told, they weren't supposed to because it was so dirty or whatever. And, like I got to take Todd Haynes and Christine Vachon to a country western bar in Dallas, which blew their minds.
Did they line dance? Did they do the tush push?
They did not. But later that year, when Paris is Burning was opening theatrically, and a good friend of mine was the rep for the studio, she was like, I'm taking Jenny Livingston and Willie Ninja out. Please come hang out with us and have dinner or whatever. So we had dinner, and then I took them to the gay country western bar, and Willie Ninja got on the floor there was this adorable, like, big white whiskered old guy with red suspenders who would teach the dance classes for people who didn't know how to boot scoot and stuff. He took Willie Ninja and like scooted him around the floor for a full rotation. I'm just like, I'm witnessing something here. I don't know what it is, but it's great.
I love it. What's the name of the country bar? Did it have a fun name?
The Roundup.
The Roundup makes perfect sense.
The Roundup Saloon.
Very simple. You worked at Outfest for a number of years, the gay film festival. Yeah. Do you have moments that you remember that were Outfest magic, or is that something that goes away if you're working there? It only happens if you're not privy to what goes on. I remember volunteering. I volunteered a lot there, and I would always have lobby crushes. It was a whole thing. But I remember, they had 4 tickets to an advanced screening, and I don't think people knew what it was. And me and 3 of the other volunteers went, packed Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Oh, wow. I remember that year.
I don't think we knew what it was. I think it was a surprise, and we just lost our minds.
I'll tell you, whenever I think about sort of most unforgettable Outfest moments, I come back to the Xanadu sing along at the
Ford Amphitheater.
The Ford Amphitheater. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I had a brain fart. And you yelling to all of us every single line of Suspended in Time because somehow that one didn't have subtitles on it.
Right. Well, which is also because it was it wasn't a hit, it wasn't a single. So sometimes people don't give that song its due, and so that must have happened with the subtitle. But yeah, we all had shirts made, a bunch of shirts made that said Xanadu. Cut to, here's a fun thing. Okay, so you remember we did that podcast about Xanadu. I was the guest on yours, and you let me play it on mine. Okay, so a friend of mine named Rustin listened to the podcast. He's a huge Xanadu fan. He'd been wanting to get Xanadu fans together, and I think that podcast lit a fire under his ass. So we all got together. We had a luncheon. There was guests. It was a whole thing. Great. Now they're showing it at the Academy on July 4th, and I got an email from Rustin. He's found a way to make the jackets. You know how the jackets are at the end where he has that Xanadu? We all want jackets, one. Yeah. So I think it's happening. So that's amazing. Started from that conversation that we had.
I'll take it. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, it's dreams don't die. And right now it's a limited run of jackets, but who knows? It could turn into an Etsy thing. I don't know what's going to happen.
I think there's a demand out there for sure.
Another gay movie that I thought of when I was looking through your book, there was a movie called Time to Leave. Do you remember this? It's the Francois Ozon and he's dying on the beach.
Yes. I interviewed Melville Poupeau for that movie at the Miami Film Festival, weirdly enough. Yeah, that's a great one.
I had just started dating somebody. We were a few months in, and we went to see that. I was like, come and see this arty gay movie with me. And this person that I was dating had a bout with cancer, and he'd beat it and all of that. But we went to that movie. It's about a guy who's dying. And we left there, and he cried for another 2 hours. And it was like something came uncorked. And it was beautiful, actually. But it was like pretty early in the dating. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I felt like I caused it. Me and my arty movies. But yeah, it's just, I think you do all your work in movies, reviewing and festivals. And then once in a while, you're reminded of the power of them, right? Of how they impact people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a story I told once on Linoleum Knife, but there's a French film a few years back called Summer Hours, and it's about a family and sort of like how it's kind of a metaphorical thing about like who is basically going to be the safeguard of our cultural treasures, and how are subsequent generations going to know like what needs to be preserved, what needs to be, saved and kind of cherished, and what sort of just kind of gets thrown to the wayside because, the youth don't care about it or whatever. Anyway, there's the mother of the family, like matriarch, there's like 5 or 6 kids. And one of her children is this, like, he's an economist, he's, a PhD, and he writes these very weighty books. And she has a scene with one of her other kids where she talks about how like, oh yeah, I have his books. They sit by my bedside. I can't understand a word he's talking about. And just, a very whatever scene, nothing, no big, like emotional heart-stirring thing. But I had this moment of like, oh shit. My mother died when I was in college. She has never read a book that I wrote. And that came down on me like a ton of bricks. And I had to leave the theater and go like cry in the lobby for 10 minutes. And it was just out of nowhere. Like the filmmaker never intended that to be a big moving moment, but it just said this thing to me and triggered this thing in my head that was just like emotionally devastating. So yeah, that's the thing about movies. Like they'll just sneak up on you sometimes. And even something that is completely benign, but like a character will show up wearing the jacket that your dead father used to wear, or someone will say something that was a thing that, was an inside joke in a relationship that you had that's now over, or whatever. I mean, like, and it's not always sad. It can be something that's just funny or weird or, reminds you of things. But yeah, I think it taps into our consciousness in a way that other art forms don't quite so readily.
Yeah. Saying that, hearing your story, it made me think of Cinema Paradiso, which is one of my favorite movies, not particularly gay, but I saw it when it first came out a few times, and I remember the second time seeing it in Century City Mall and walking outside and not knowing where I was. Like, I don't know where I am. I was so lost in it, I kind of got confused after I left the theater. Like I didn't.
Wait, this isn't Italy?
What happened? Like, I guess I have a car. Is there a thing like a car? Like, I don't know. And it wasn't the first time I saw it. It was the second time. But I saw it recently at Vidiots. They were playing it. And the ending, of course, is a real tearjerker and you cry.
Sure.
I cried from the beginning to the end. And it's dad stuff. I didn't realize it back then. I have a lot of dad stuff, it turns out. And, the projectionist and Toto, that was was very paternal relationship. And I just found it so moving and so beautiful. Are there movies that make you cry when you go back to them?
So many.
Yeah.
You have no idea what a soft touch I am.
You're more of a soft touch than your husband, Dave.
Oh, yeah. No, pretty much always.
Yeah.
Actually, our joke is he's like, I'll cry in real life. You only cry at movies. And it's true. That's pretty much where my emotions live.
That's really interesting to me.
I could give you a long ass list, including the currently in theaters animated film Robot Dreams.
Yeah.
That's a recent one for me, but like, Babette's Feast, The Color Purple,
right?
The Steven Spielberg version, It's a Wonderful Life every year.
Yeah.
I have a whole bunch of them.
I cried in Hot Tub Time Machine, and I still get, because it was about friends being there for each other and all of that stuff. Speaking of which, I'm going to share a little story. I'm looking at a picture I have in my room. You're in it. And this was in 2016, and I was going through a rough time, and my friend Brett tricked me and told me to come over to his house because I needed to shoot a thing for him.
Right.
And when I got there was no thing to be shot. There was no project. It was just my friends coming around to support me. I call it my surprise don't kill yourself party, which is trademark, so don't steal it. But I see you in that picture, and I look at it every day, and it makes me smile and it moves me. But you talk about how you experience emotions in the movies. In our 30 years of friendship, I've never seen you lose it. I've never seen you, like, nobody calls me as saying, Alonso's spiraling, we need to have a party and trick him. Like, you seem, I wrote the word unflappable down, but thoughts?
Oh, please. Talk to Dave White. He will tell you I'm real flappable. I mean,
right.
like the last year in like writing this book and finishing it on deadline, and then like all of this, like just the last couple months of, and believe me, I am nothing but thrilled and honored and grateful that anybody wants to talk to me about anything.
Right.
But like, I have been really hoofing it for this book.
Right.
And there are days where I'm just like, how many podcasts did I say yes to? What am I doing? Where do I have to be? By when? On top of like my other life of podcasting and whatnot. And there are days where I'm just like, you know, and I feel like I'm losing it. And so he is my rock. And that, like, yes. So like, I am not unflappable, but when I do flap, he's there.
Well, you're also somebody that always has more than one job. How many podcasts are you hosting right now? 5? Okay. Linoleum Knife. Is that including all the linoleum knives, or?
Oh, no. When counting Linoleum Knife is one, not counting all the extra.
And there's
Patreon
4
shows.
other ones.
Yes.
Break them down.
Okay, Breakfast All Day, which is
it.
the show that I do with Christy Lemire. It's on YouTube, but it's also a podcast. Maximum Film on the Maximum Fun Network. I have a weekly appearance on Deck the Hallmark.
Right on.
And then we just dropped the first 3 episodes of The Film Library, a Canopy podcast, which I'm doing with Daniel from Deck the Hallmark. He and I did a show a couple years ago called A Film and a Movie, where we would talk to critics and filmmakers and different people about sort of like older movies and then more recent ones that they had influenced. We had Sam Pancake on once and did Bergman's Autumn Sonata and Postcards from the Edge.
Love it.
Which was fun. But yeah, we had like, you know, like Kimberly Pierce was on that show and you know, Justin Chang and Amy Nicholson. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, so this is a show where we talk about the Canopy streaming service, and we've been interviewing really fun folks like, the episodes that we dropped are Patton Oswalt, Kristen Lopez, and Justin Simeon. And in coming weeks, we've got like Cheryl Dunier and Alex Winter and Justin Chang. And so, yeah, I'm on 5 podcasts right now.
Do you ever forget if you said something on one or not?
I decided not to care about that. Like,
Did I share this story before or not? Yeah.
If I try to be exclusive, I would just go bananas. And a lot of times it's not uncommon for like a new movie to come out. And I talk about it on Linoleum Knife and on Breakfast All Day and on Max Film. And I figure, look, if you're listening to all of those podcasts and you hear me repeat myself, that's on you.
Yeah. I'm not going to change my opinion, or, you know, I'm going to hate it on this one, or I'm going to love it on this one. Did you know, the media business changes a lot. Film festivals, film critics and stuff. And you're always able to pivot and all of that stuff. Have you had times when you're like, when you felt a little more desperate, or you're a king pivoter. My hat is off. And from one pivoter to another.
I was going to say.
Yeah, but I haven't attended any parties for you where people are like, he's losing it. Please come over. We're going to have food and just, yeah.
For sure. I mean, you know, I think like, there's always these moments where like a gig ends, whether on your behalf or someone else ends it for you. And suddenly you're like, now what? And trying to kind of cobble stuff together. And there have been some, you know, there have been like entire years where like, you know, the last time that Dave and I ever put too many of our eggs in one basket and that site went away, that was a learning curve.
Right.
Ever since then, it was like, nope, gotta spread it around because you never know what they're going to pull the plug on. So yeah, I'd say it definitely, you know, I have some troughs in there where you're like, oh fuck, now what, you know? And that's just, I think just sort of the nature of the beast, unfortunately, because, there are so few of those like, legacy full-time gigs left, you know. I'm reminded of, did you see the thing recently where the Art Directors Guild, they do this big internship every year for like 25 people. And this year they were like, we cannot in good conscience do this program because 75% of our membership are currently unemployed.
Yeah, I did see that post, and I brought it up to an art director the other day that I met in line at an event. And I was like, was that a hoax or was that a real thing that they did? They did it.
Yeah. And so my thing now, when anybody's like, oh, how do I become a film critic? My new answer is I cannot in good conscience, recommend that you pursue this because, you know, it's just, you know, I think what the situation has led to, and you're living as much living proof of this as anybody is like, you have to sort of think on your feet and improvise and make stuff up and, you know, find a way to monetize things and ideas and, programs, whatever, in a way that isn't, someone hands you a big check. And I think in that space, we're seeing a lot of people find a lot of different ways to do that.
Yeah. Do you ever have moments where you're like, I can't believe I'm still here?
Yes.
I think that like on a daily basis. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't really have plans. I mean, I try.
Sure.
But yeah.
No, I mean, cause like I'm the youngest child of my, 7 kids in my family. And so a lot of my older siblings are now retiring or are about to retire. And I'm kind of like, well, that's nice.
I'm like, someday people are retiring. I'm like, my ship's coming in. I just know it.
No, I have no ship. Like I don't think retirement is never going to be in the cards for me. Like right. I'm going to slump over dead at my soundboard or my laptop one day, in the middle of, opining about something,
How do you organize your life? Do you have a planner? Is it all on your phone? How do you remember, okay, I'm taping this podcast, then this one there. I have to see this movie.
I have a Dave White. I'm telling you.
You have a Dave White. So he's like,
I'm so terrible at this. Like we have to sort of sit down a couple times a week, and I have a lot of things on my phone or on my computer, but he kicks it old school. He's got an at-a-glance and a pencil.
I love an at-a-glance.
And he's
I love
just
an
like,
at-a-glance.
Here's what's going on. And thank God, because otherwise I would be a complete disaster.
And do you sexually harass him? Are you like, come on, sugar tits, what's my schedule? It's not a Mad Men dynamic.
Hey, give me some coffee while you're at it.
Give me some coffee while you're at it.
Hate to see you go, but I'd love to watch you leave.
Are there movies in the book, and I think there are, that were landmark at the time but don't age particularly well? I'm thinking of like Dallas Buyers Club, which wasn't that long ago, but I don't think that would get made with that cast.
Probably not. I think that because of that movie, that really sort of made a lot of people sort of step up and go, you know what? Maybe we don't cast cis performers as trans characters, I think that there's a lot of that movie that doesn't work for me that people would still do just because I think that the safe bet is always the one that people want to take in terms of talking about, queer characters or, the way that lives that are lived. But yeah, that aspect of it, I think certainly by this point they would rethink and do differently. I think like people thought that Tea and Sympathy was really bold in the 50s, and that movie is incredibly hacky. And I mean, it's Vincent Minnelli, so of course it's cool to look at, and there's some nice performances and all, but it's like, it is so timid, and it is so like constantly letting you know this character is not gay, even though everybody thinks he is because he has his walk has a little sissy in it, Yeah. But it's, that one's really playing it safe. But like, I think that Making Love doesn't get its due for being fairly bold for 1982, for a major studio movie of 1982 to go that route and to have, a straight marriage ending because the husband realizes he's gay and not demonizing him or her or even the guy that he has an affair with about it. And for having, some, love making, I guess, there is some making out and some shirtlessness and some stuff. I think that movie is, a lot more ahead of the game than people think. It's very easy to sort of write it off as like, oh, it's the, guess who's coming to dinner of gayness. But I think it's actually, again, for the period, pretty bold.
Are there other movies when you went back to look at them for the book where you're like, wow, this really speaks to this moment? Like this holds up. This isn't just a product of its time. It resonates.
Yeah. I mean, I think a thing that comes up a lot is just like, and anybody who really delves into history knows this way better than I do, but everything is so cyclical. You look back and like all the shit that is being hurled at, like, especially trans people right now, like they've become the convenient target for so many like right-wing politicians. They're saying the same bullshit that like Anita Bryant said in the 70s about, gay men and lesbians. They're saying the same shit that like, hate to bring them up, but the Nazis were saying, about queer people when they were, destroying all of Magnus Hirschfeld's work and library and archives. And so, things just kind of come up over and over again. So like there's this amazing documentary called Gay USA that just got a new restoration. And in fact, I'm going to be screening it on TCM on the 21st, but there's also a really great new Blu-ray of it. And it basically on one day in 1977 were like all the Pride parades. So New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, and there were camera crews covering all of them. And they edited it together into this one sort of tableau. And it was the first Pride parade, like after this murder of a gay man in San Francisco that the police had just kind of like not done anything about, and after all the Anita Bryant bullshit in Florida. And so people were angry and really like stepped up and so much of what they're talking about and the way that the people participating in this parade are describing their lives and talking about what they've been through, talking about what the dialogue they're having to have with like straight family and friends and stuff. On the one hand, there are aspects of it that are maybe a little dated, but then other parts that feel like, am I watching the news?
Right.
So yeah, I think so much of, for whatever progress we think we've made, and we've made it, certainly, it can be undone so easily. We can't sort of sit back and be, casual about it. Like it's okay, that's done. Moving on.
Yeah. You've done a lot of television stuff too. You've done things that I've worked on with you. You always come in, you always kill it. Do you get recognized much out in the world?
Weirdly enough, the thing that I would ever get recognized for was when I was doing a web show called What the Flick on the Young Turks Network, which is where Christy and I used to do that show with Ben Mankiewicz and Matt Atchity, and then we started Breakfast All Day after the Young Turks canceled that show. But for some reason, that show was the one where like we would, Dave always likes to goof on this. We were out somewhere and some guy at a distance literally yelled out, "Hey, what the flick?"
I love it.
Which I guess is like if you're Bruce Willis and somebody else, "Hey, Die Hard." I don't know.
That is excellent. And you also feel like you should give an answer because it is a question, but it doesn't really make sense.
It's a rhetorical question at best.
You obviously love movies. You've worked in that world forever. Did you ever want to make one? Do you have a script in a drawer?
Not really. I know the popular concept is that like all film critics are frustrated filmmakers, but I've just always really liked the observation and I think the active criticism, people tend to think it's just like, this is great, that sucked, but there's a lot more going on with that. It's about sort of like putting it in the context of the culture and comparing it to things that have existed before or the actual filmmaker's earlier work or, who's inspired them, whatever. And so, yeah, that aspect of it I've always, been really interested in, and it's never been out of a sort of frustrated desire to do my own thing. That said, I do have an idea for two Hallmark movies that would be set on one of those Christmas riverboat cruises where they go to the Christmas markets in like Belgium and Germany. And one movie would be a romance and one movie would be a murder mystery on the same cruise. And like some characters would be involved in both, but like the people in the romance wouldn't know that the murder is happening and the people dealing with the murder wouldn't know about the romance.
I love it. I would give you the green light. You're very smart. You wrote a book about Christmas movies. Then you've got into the Hallmark Christmas universe. And so when Christmas comes along, I bet your phone's ringing off the hook. And now it's going to be the same with Pride. Oh, let's get the Pride movie guy. Very smart.
I figure if you reach out to me in June and December, like, I want to have those on lockdown,
That's smart though. I applaud it. It's great. This book was obviously a crunch and a lot of work and probably a lot of stress. What did you learn from doing it? What did it mean to you in your life to have done this?
There are times where, and I'm sure you've had this too, where like there's this stuff that you are interested in and have had kind of floating around in your head, but you've never really sort of turned it into a thing. And I remember having this feeling when our friend Paul hooked me up to do an interview for the original DVD of Valley of the Dolls that came out.
Right.
And I got to just sort of like spill out all of my lore and all of the things that I, knew about that movie and my little obsessions and, in this moment, look for this thing to happen, blah, blah, blah. And when that came out, there was a part of me that felt like I could get hit by a bus now. And at least I know this has been captured.
Right.
And so this book, I think really, all the dribs and drabs and bits and bobs of like queer film history, like they're all in one place and they're between two covers. And so that is, there's something almost sort of reassuring that like, it's like when you're memorizing something for a test and then the test happens and then you don't necessarily forget it all, but you don't have to be thinking about it quite so much. So like it's down on paper and so that's a nice thing.
Right. And all those little factoids, those things that you brought up that you find meaningful or funny or, ooh, that's interesting. Other people can discover them now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you did that thing.
And I mean, look, this is a book that exists because of the books that came before it, because of Vito Russo in the Celluloid Closet and, William Mann's Behind the Screen and Ruby Rich's, New Queer Cinema. Like, I'm not inventing any wheels here. Like I'm working off of scholarship that exists. And then I hope that, later on this book becomes a part of a larger piece that somebody else is going to be putting together.
I love it. It could be a textbook in schools. Also, ka-ching, ka-ching, if it's a textbook.
I wish.
Yeah. When you sign it, what do you write? Or do you vary it?
It depends. If it's somebody
do you write
that
"See
I
you
know,
at the movies"?
I do not.
Who said that? Siskel and Ebert. That was their thing.
It was. And then on their original show, and then it became The Balcony is Closed. If you're a friend of mine, I will usually write, how bitchy fags can be.
That's amazing. I love that.
From Valley of the Dolls. But, for folks I don't know, I will just put like with pride,
With pride. I love it. So tell people how they can find the book.
So it is available wherever you purchase fine literature, online at bookstores. It's a book, it's an ebook, and it's an audio book. So all those versions are floating around. I read the audio book.
How was that? It takes a long time, doesn't it?
Daunting. Yeah, definitely. It was several days in the studio, but it was cool. I'm glad I did it. I can't listen to it yet, but at some point I will, I'm sure.
What was the hardest name to pronounce?
Some of the German ones. Yeah. I had to reach out to my friend Tilo and be like, can you give me a phonetic on this one? I need to know. But also like if you have a library card and you should, because your local library has all kinds of amazing things, ask them. And if they don't have it, see if they will and see if they've got the audiobook or the ebook on the Libby app. So, cause I get it. This is a coffee table book. It's a little pricey, but just cause it's not in your budget, you can still read it. I hope you do and enjoy it. So yeah, get it in any of those places.
I love that I get to go to people's houses years from now and they'll have it and I'll be like, my friend wrote that. Because you feel like it's going to be one of those books that are like out and around.
I hope that happens.
Also, I learned something about cruising that I didn't know.
What's that?
The actors that played the killer, like I knew that they were different actors that they used to play the killer, and that was meant to be, I don't know, ambiguous. But but some of them were victims and killers, or more than one.
Yeah,
break that down.
The guy who gets stabbed early on, the "I'm here, you're here" guy. I think then later you see him with the shades on and he's killing somebody else. Like maybe in the Peep Show. I need a murder board to remember who's where. But yeah, I think he's the recycled victim who also plays the killer. That's.
Yeah, it couldn't be just because of budget. He meant
to
do that. That was in the design. Interesting.
And I'll tell you, I learned so much about cruising, collaborating with you on the screening party chapter.
I know. We watched that a lot and laughed a lot. Yeah, those were good times. And you're on the cover of Screening Party. Thank you for that. Remember that photo shoot? It was like Vanity Fair.
Yes.
Yeah, I was into it.
On the back where I belong.
Here's my final thought. I love you. I love our friendship. I love that I've known you. I'm so proud that because I remember listening to Linoleum Knife and you're like, I have this deal. And it felt like a runaway train that we were all on. And look at the result. It's beautiful and congratulations. And here's my final thought. It's June. What does pride mean to you? Or what are your memories of pride? Anything about pride when you think about it?
Yeah, I have to say, I am one of those people who maybe got a little jaded about pride.
Yeah.
But, like after a few years, like, am I doing this again? And then I saw a meme online this year that I thought that really, actually two memes that have been floating around that I think really kind of hit me. One was, pride still matters because someone out there thinks tonight that it would be better to be dead than to be gay. And the other one was, if you wonder why we still have Pride, go look at the comment section of any coverage of Pride parades or events in your local newspaper. And that's it. The struggle continues, and we have to actively talk about Pride because so many people are actively talking about shame.
Yeah, I agree. One year I went to Dubai in May or early June. And I went to a gay club with my friend Zaid, the filmmaker, was living there. And we went to a club that was gay, but not really gay, but whatever. And there was, you just felt the repression around, although there were people still having fun, whatever. And I remember flying back home and thinking, I'm going to go to Pride and I'm really going to appreciate it this year. I've been to other places and I know our freedoms. So I've got my shirt, I'm walking down the thing, and like, I'm not even to the festival yet, and like 2 or 3 drunk people literally like stagger into me. I was like, oh, right, it's about drunk people. I forgot it. I thought it was about solidarity.
Damn.
I know. It was like practically, if it were a movie, I would make him puke on my shoes, but it didn't go that far. But I do remember the cut from, yeah, to, oh yeah, I forgot.
Oh, this.
Oh, this. All right. Here's my final thought, my real final thought. Yeah. Last year, I thought the Oscar nominations for Best Picture was jam-packed with good stuff. I was like, there's a lot of good movies. I'm worried about this year. What movie are you excited about that's coming up? What should I be excited about?
Oh, that hasn't come out yet?
Yeah. Or that you're excited about, like, I can't wait to see that, or...
Oh, God, good question. Because my answer for this for a while had been Furiosa, but then I saw it.
I'm seeing it tonight, by the way. Thank you for that.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. That's all right.
I don't know, but I will say that, given that we're almost at the halfway point of the year, I feel like I've seen a lot of really great movies.
Oh, good. Challengers?
Like Challengers, yes. The top of the list. Have you seen Hundreds of Beavers yet?
No.
You have to see Hundreds of Beavers.
Good.
It is a silent comedy where the beavers are all played by like grown men in like big beaver mascot outfits.
Okay.
And it is like a feature-length Looney Tunes cartoon where you think it's going to run out of steam after 15 minutes and it goes for 100, and it's hilarious throughout.
Good.
There's a lot of stuff out there that's really cool. Actually, you know what? I'll tell you what I'm excited about. I forget what it's called. It's something like The Day the Earth Blew Up. It's the first feature-length, all-animated Looney Tunes movie. It's premiering this week at the Annecy Film Festival, and it's going to be opening in theaters before the end of the year. It was going to go to Max, but I think now this is their like, hey, stop bugging us about Coyote versus Acme. We'll give you this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, these are fun things to look forward to. So thank you. Thank you so much, Alonso. And
thank you, sir.
Congrats on
Always
the book.
A pleasure.
And enjoy the rest of your media blitz. And I hope you get another podcast. Oh, can I share you my other favorite thing, which you'll appreciate because you know the person?
Shoot.
I've been hosting Dennis Anyone for 10 years. You know my friend Brett Friedman, who was the one that threw the surprise Don't Kill Yourself party. So his favorite thing to do now, and he's been doing it for a couple of months, is whenever the idea of a podcast comes up, he'll go, you know what, Dennis, you should do a podcast. He acts like I haven't been doing one for 10 years. And he sells the bit really well, and it never doesn't make me laugh. Oh yeah, I was talking to this guy who does a podcast. Have you ever thought about doing one? Like he'll say shit like that. It's something in this delivery, but so that would be like me saying to you right now, you know what you should go into? Have you ever thought about doing a podcast?
Brett, have you ever thought about makeup as a career?
I don't know why I find it so funny every time he does it. He sells it because it kind of comes out of the blue. Like I'll be like, I was doing an interview on my podcast. He goes, oh, that's so cool. You're starting a podcast. Like it kills me every time. So every time I see you, I'm going to say like, Alonso, you know what? I was thinking about
Have you thought about?
And you're like, I have 5. Thank you. And you probably have another one about to start. So maybe I should clear the Zoom.
Any minute now. Yeah.
All right. Hopefully I will see you soon. It's been too long.
I hope so. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Alonso Duralde. Pick up his book, Hollywood Pride, wherever you get your books. And also follow him on Instagram because he's got a lot of fun events coming up tied to the book. And maybe you'll be able to catch one of those. All right, so this happened. Last night, my friend Danny and I went over to our friends Doug and John's and we watched Outstanding on Netflix. It's a documentary about the history of queer people in stand-up comedy. And I thought it was excellent. I learned a lot of things I didn't know before. And one of my favorite things about it is I knew some of the folks in it, including my friend Jim David, who is a stand-up comic. We first met on a gay cruise. He was performing on it. I was doing a book event, and we've been friends ever since. He's been on this podcast a couple of times, and I was thinking about things about the documentary that I liked or wanted to ask people about or kind of discuss. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to see if I can get Jim to do a quick interview. And he said yes. So if you haven't watched the documentary yet, you might get an idea of what it's like from this interview. And if you have, you might enjoy it as well. So here is my friend Jim David. All right, joining me from New York City, it's my friend Jim David. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Dennis. How are you?
I am good, and I loved seeing you in Outstanding, the documentary about the history of LGBTQ stand-up comedy. I loved the remarks that you had to say. You made this one great point, and let me see if I'm getting it right, where you talked about sort of the double standard in comedy. Like,
I said that for some people, when like a comedian talks about his wife or his girlfriend, that's his life. But if he talks about his boyfriend or his husband, he has an agenda.
Right.
All of a sudden. And I got that a lot when I first came out. I would go on all these. I first came out in like 97, 98. Right. And then I did my Comedy Central special in 2000. And to my surprise, became the first openly gay man to have a Comedy Central special. That's what they told me. And so all of a sudden I was a known gay person, and I would do these gigs around the country in clubs, and the audience did not expect to see a gay comedian.
Right.
I was a surprise. And to some people, I was pushing a homosexual agenda, but just because the only jokes that I told when I first came out were about my parents' reaction and my partner, who's now my husband.
Right.
That's it. I didn't say anything about the gay issue. I didn't say anything about the religious right. I didn't say anything. It was just all personal.
Right.
And yet, because people on the radio, they said, well, why are you pushing this homosexual agenda? The radio people are the ones that didn't know how to deal with it.
Interesting. Radio people.
I wish I'd said that in the documentary.
Yeah.
Because I did everywhere I went, like the Funny Bone in Columbus, Ohio, or
right.
The Skyline Comedy Club in Wisconsin. I'd do local radio.
Right.
And every radio show has a bunch of Howard Stern wannabes.
Right.
And they fail miserably about it, and they just come across as racist, sexist, and homophobic. They come across as a bunch of Yahoo frat boys, right? And then when they'd say, "So you have a wife?" I said, "No, I have a partner. I have a boyfriend." What? I mean, they literally were
like record
what?
scratch. Like, yeah. Like, how did you even get in the studio?
Surprise, surprise. I was a stealth homosexual.
Let me tell you something that struck me about the documentary. I was at the concert where they were all performing at the Greek in LA. I happened to be there that night, and it was great. It was a great night.
3-hour show.
Yeah, and they used a lot of footage from that night. I was struck by, and I think you went to a screening in Tribeca, so you may have had a similar experience, how lonely every individual must have felt at some point in their career with this being gay, like feeling very isolated, and then to see them all together and to see this history and this story. There was something very moving about it emotionally, to see people that were probably feeling very isolated in this world have a community suddenly, and all of them together standing on the stage. Did you have an experience like that watching it when you were watching it at the festival?
Not so much.
Go with me on my deep thought, Jim. I'm getting poignant.
Well, I mean, I thought, well, that's cool. They're all together. But
right.
every comedian, no matter their sexuality, feels isolated and alone. I just got back from 10 weeks on the road. I was on 17 airplanes, 9 ships, 8 hotels, 3 solo theater shows. I was all by myself. And so that had nothing to do with being gay. Do you know what I mean? Right.
So it's just kind of a lonely existence generally.
Oh, yeah. But also, I see your point totally, because especially when I came out, I felt very isolated at a comedy club, because a lot of the homophobia that I got was from other comedians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. May he not rest in peace. This comedian named Patrice O'Neill, who was a very, very large African-American comedian. And he and I did a show called Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn together.
I remember that show.
The nastiest people I've ever met in my entire life. And he would go out of his way to make me feel uncomfortable before we went on camera. And so I was not prepared for that.
Wow.
That was very isolating. Yeah.
Yeah. But what was it like to watch it, the documentary? What was your takeaway?
I was very moved and I was very honored to be there. I didn't like the way I looked. I thought I looked like my grandmother. But I'm, that's it. I'm a man of a certain age, and I'm not going to have plastic surgery. It wouldn't improve anything.
Yeah.
I'd have to be reborn.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought it was a fascinating documentary of LGBT history. I mean, I'd put it on the equal par with a documentary called The Celluloid Closet, which is all about LGBT people in movies.
Right.
And so I thought this was sort of the same thing, because especially dealing with Robin Tyler, who was the first lesbian to come out. She was the first gay person to come out on television.
Right. The early history was new to me. Some of it.
Yeah. So that's what I thought was fascinating. I thought the other thing is that Paige Hurwitz, who's director, and she did a brilliant job. She, she basically took what we all said in our interviews. I mean, they talked to me for like an hour.
Right.
They only used like a minute and a half of me, but that's what they did to everybody. But she took what we said, and out of what we said really created a narrative.
Yeah, and it took you through the whole history of it. I learned things that I didn't know. Moms Mabley, I didn't know was a lesbian.
Me too, right?
Yeah, and some of the early people I hadn't heard of, like the couple with the variety show early on, the
Robin Tyler and her girlfriend.
Yeah, and I didn't, and it was sort of like the Donnie Marie of that era. It had that same aesthetic and the Bruce Valanche of it all. So I think people should watch the documentary and
it's a very entertaining documentary.
Yeah.
And the only quibble with it is that it could have been longer. It could have been a 5-part Ken Burns series.
It could have been the Ken Burns thing. Yeah.
It could have been, as far as I know. I mean, there's so much material.
Yeah.
And they could have had even longer, segments of the people's comedy.
Yeah.
Because it could have had more comedy in it.
Yeah. Well, and I also, people that I've known a long time, I met Margaret Cho around the time of All American Girl, and we were friends for a while. And seeing her talk about that time and seeing where she is now and how she's always been such a force in the gay community, I just had such an appreciation for that. Like, you get a sense of the overall journey, and I think that's what's powerful about the documentary.
Margaret was and is always one of a kind.
Yeah.
And
cool.
And when she lost her TV series, because they didn't know what to do with her, you know what I mean? They wanted to do a show about an Asian family, but they wanted her to be this perfect little Asian girl. And she's a very transgressive, political blabbermouth. So they didn't know what to do with that. See, that's the problem with the industry. And this is for gay, straight. They hire you, but then they don't want you to be you.
Yeah.
And in fact, my friend Lewis Black does a hilarious routine about how they wrote a sitcom for him. And then they said, we found a better you than you.
That's rough. That's got to hurt. That's one of those showbiz blows. Exactly. Jim, thank you for talking to me about this. Everyone should watch the special. And I've been asking.
Outstanding, a comedy revolution.
Yeah.
It is at your fingertips.
All right. This is going to be part of the last episode I do for Pride. So my question is to you, finally. What does gay pride mean to you? Or do you have memories of Pride? Anything about Pride that pops up?
Well, I live in New York City, and so I used to go to Pride all the time and to all the events. And I went to it. When I first came to New York, right after college, Pride was a very small affair.
Yeah.
It wasn't as big a deal. It's the same with the Village Halloween Parade. It just wasn't as big a deal.
Yeah.
But now it's this corporate behemoth, and, the parade lasts 11 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but it's what it's always meant to me is that we still have to have it.
Yeah.
Because people are out there trying to literally erase LGBT people from existence. Like Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is literally trying to stop the progress that we made. Just stop it. That's what conservatives do, is they stop it. They stand aside history and go, stop.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to still have Pride. And so that's why it's very meaningful to me to, as somebody who struggled with being gay as a youngster, now all of a sudden Coca-Cola thinks I'm cool.
Right? I know. And I love a Coke Zero. So I think we're all on the same page.
And when we got married, when Dan and I got married in 2012, we had seen in the Pride Parade register at Macy's.
Wow.
For all the gay couples. And so we went and registered at Macy's, And it was so early in the process that the form still said bride and groom.
Right.
Didn't say, spouse A and spouse B.
Yeah.
So, but Macy's was more than happy to have our business.
Yeah.
And they were early on. So good for Macy's.
Good for Macy's.
If I hadn't seen them in the parade, I wouldn't have registered with them.
Right. See, it worked. Their evil plan
Isn't that
worked.
hilarious?
Yeah. I love it. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Have a great weekend.
Thank
You're
you,
heading
Dennis.
off to
Good to
Fire
see you, buddy.
Island. And congrats on the doc.
bye-bye.
It's really wonderful. All right. Thanks to Jim, David, and also Alonso for helping us round out Pride Month with a really jam-packed, fun episode that's very gay and very pridey. Before I let you go, I want to give a shout out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye!